I told my daughter one thing. Don't bring your stepdad to the birthday dinner. She laughed it off and called me jealous and insecure. She went ahead to invite him, and on the night, he was named as the guest of honor. When it was time for her to give a speech, she made a toast to her stepdad and said he was the best thing to ever happen to her. I smiled and left immediately. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. Would you take a wild guess before you continue the story? What do you think I'd do to her? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel to support us. It will be great to know in the comments section where you are listening from. Now let me tell you everything that happened. I raised her alone after her mother left. That's not a line I throw around to earn sympathy. It's a truth that sits like concrete in my chest. I was 33, grieving, newly single, and holding a 2-year-old girl who looked at me like I was her entire world. And for years I was. Diaper changes at 3 a.m. with board meetings at 9. Ballet recitals followed by client dinners. Scraping together enough money to start my first company while making sure she never once felt the absence of a mother. I gave her stability. I gave her vacations, good schools, a damn pony at one point. And every time someone praised her smile or her intelligence, I felt like I was doing something right. Like I was enough. So imagine spending nearly 2 decades being enough, and then waking up one day and realizing you've been quietly replaced. I started noticing the shift after she turned 16. That's when her mother, after more than a decade of sporadic birthday calls and holiday cards, decided to rebrand herself as the nurturing parent. Along with that transformation came her new husband, a man with a dazzling smile and the uncanny ability to insert himself into every narrative like he belonged there. He wasn't abusive, wasn't loud or overbearing. If anything, that made it worse. He was polite, too polite. The kind of man who asks if you're okay with him hugging your daughter, and then goes ahead and hugs her anyway. I don't hate the man. That would give him too much credit. But I never liked him. Not because of jealousy, despite what my daughter would later claim, but because I saw what he was doing, erasing the role I bled to maintain. By the time she turned 23, he was at every gathering. Her graduation? He sat beside me. Her first apartment? He helped her move in. And each time, I told myself, don't make it about you. I swallowed the lump in my throat, shook his hand, smiled for photos. I didn't want to be the petty father. I just wanted her happy. That was the currency I dealt in, her happiness, her peace. But peace isn't peace if it comes at the cost of self-respect. That's something I wish I'd realized earlier. Because by the time her 25th birthday rolled around, I found myself offering just one simple request. Don't bring your stepdad to the dinner I'm hosting for you. I said it gently, over coffee, like it wasn't a big deal. I even added a soft chuckle, like I was trying to keep it light. But I meant it. Every syllable. I needed one evening, just one, where I didn't have to sit across from the man who'd become the hero in my daughter's story. She laughed when I said it. Full-on laughed, like I'd just told her a joke. You're being insecure, she said. Jealous, even. That's not a good look on you. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were so casually delivered. Like I was an afterthought in her emotional hierarchy. I didn't argue. I just said, it's your choice, but if he comes, I'll know where I stand. She brushed that off too. Told me not to be dramatic. Said it was her day, and she had the right to invite whoever made her feel loved. That word, loved, echoed long after she hung up. It stayed with me through the week, through the errands I ran to make her dinner perfect, through the handwritten card I spent hours rewriting because I wanted it to sound just right. Somewhere deep inside, I think I already knew she wouldn't honor my request. But there's a part of every parent, especially the ones who've sacrificed more than they ever admitted, that believes their child will come through. That love will eventually be enough. That was my mistake. The night of the dinner was warm, California September, you know? The kind of night where the breeze carries laughter and perfume, and you almost forget how fragile everything is. I rented out a private space at her favorite restaurant, had the chef prepare her favorite dishes, even arranged a string quartet, because she once mentioned she loved the cello. Guests arrived, her friends, some extended family. I stood at the entrance, greeting everyone with practiced ease, eyes scanning for her face. And then she walked in, smiling, radiant, and beside her, of course, was him. Her stepdad, dressed like he owned the room. I didn't flinch, didn't raise an eyebrow. I just nodded, said, "Good to see you," and turned to the waiter to order myself a drink strong enough to get through the evening. The conversations buzzed around me, laughter spilling across tables like confetti. People complimented the food, the music, the setup. And I smiled, because that's what I do. I perform. I host. I make sure others are comfortable, even when I'm splintering inside. It wasn't until the speeches started that everything finally snapped. She stood up, glass in hand, looking every bit the woman I'd raised, confident, articulate, magnetic. She thanked her friends for coming, thanked me, briefly, for organizing everything. And then she turned to her stepdad and said, "But the real guest of honor tonight is the man who stepped in when it mattered. The man who's been my rock, my inspiration, and the best thing to ever happen to me." I don't remember if anyone clapped. I just remember the silence in my own head. It was deafening, like someone had shut off the sound on a TV, and I was watching the moment unfold with no way to intervene. I looked around the room, half expecting someone, anyone, to look uncomfortable. But no one did. They all raised their glasses. I smiled. I stood up. I walked to the door, nodded at the valet, and got in my car. I didn't drive home right away. I parked on a quiet street a few blocks away and just sat there, staring at the wheel, gripping it like it was the only thing holding me together. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just made a decision. I don't think people understand the specific kind of betrayal that comes not from strangers, but from those you spent your life protecting. It's quieter than most expect. There's no shouting, no table flipping, no dramatic exits in a swirl of broken glass and spilled wine. Sometimes, it's just the way a room goes still for you while it dances for someone else. That night, her birthday dinner, was exactly that. A stillness that told me I no longer mattered in the way I used to. And no matter how much I told myself to shake it off, to be the bigger person, to not ruin her night, I knew by the end of it I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. She had walked into the room glowing. Not just pretty, but powerful in the way people glow when they know they are loved, celebrated, adored. She wore a satin blue dress that reminded me of her 6th grade talent show, when she sang that song from Annie and the whole auditorium stood to clap. That same poise, that same spark. I remember thinking how proud I was of her, before I even noticed he was right beside her, carrying her gift like a father would. That detail stuck with me. How casually he carried the gift I had wrapped for her. He set it on the table like it belonged to him. Like she did. No one introduced him because no one had to. He was already part of the scenery. I stayed quiet through the appetizers, made polite conversation with her friends, nodded through old stories and half-hearted compliments from people who clearly hadn't seen her struggle, hadn't seen the nights I stayed up holding her through fevers or sat outside her door while she sobbed over high school heartbreak. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that maybe I was reading too much into it. But the moment he started telling a story about that time they took the road trip to Big Sur, I realized the story was mine. That trip was something I had planned 2 years ago, but he had come along last minute because she insisted. And now, in front of all these people, he told it like I hadn't even been there. The table laughed at his version. She leaned on his shoulder, giggling, nodding, eyes warm with memory. I looked at my plate and felt the weight of every unpaid debt of fatherhood crushing down on me. I had spent days preparing that night. Not just money, though the venue hadn't come cheap, but energy, emotional bandwidth, all poured into making her feel loved. I didn't even care that I wasn't the fun parent. I never tried to compete on charisma. I only ever wanted to be respected. But by the time she stood up to give her toast, I could already feel the shape of the betrayal forming in my chest like a bruise. She tapped her glass, cleared her throat, and began what I expected to be a sweet, maybe slightly embarrassing speech with a few inside jokes. Instead, she opened with a thank you to everyone who'd made her who she was. She thanked her mom for always believing in her, and then turned to him, her stepdad, and everything after that felt like being skinned alive in slow motion. "This man," she said, voice trembling just slightly from what I assumed was emotion, "has been there for me in ways I can't even begin to explain. When I was lost, he helped me find myself. When I doubted everything, he reminded me of my worth." He has shown me what unconditional love looks like. Honestly, he's the best thing to ever happen to me." She raised her glass and smiled directly at him, not even glancing in my direction. The room applauded. He looked down, humble like he'd just been knighted. And I felt like I'd been erased. Cleanly, efficiently, like I never existed in the first place. I smiled, of course. I always do. Even when I'm dying inside, I've trained myself to smile. I waited for the applause to die down, pushed my chair back slowly so no one noticed, and walked out through the side exit before dessert was even served. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I just disappeared. No one stopped me. No one followed me. That's what finally broke me. The realization that not one person in that room even noticed I had gone. And if they did, they didn't care enough to check. I sat in the car, engine running, hands gripping the wheel like it was the last piece of reality I had. I thought about driving straight home and drinking myself to sleep. But I didn't. I drove to the office instead. It was almost midnight by the time I parked in the lot and walked into the building I had built from the ground up. The cleaning crew gave me a strange look, but no one said anything. I went straight to my office, sat in my leather chair, and opened her employee file. The one with her name on it. The name I had given her. The one I used to write on birthday cakes and report cards and ballet recital programs. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened a new window and emailed my lawyer. Effective immediately, remove my daughter from the will. Schedule a meeting to revise all estate documents this week. I hit send before I could change my mind. After that, I made a list. A literal list, pen and paper. Every asset she had access to. The company car, the bank cards tied to the family account, the house I'd signed over to her 2 years ago, and her executive role in the business. By the time the sun came up, the list had turned into a checklist, each item marked with a red X. I wasn't acting out of rage. It wasn't some emotional outburst. It was clarity, pure and brutal. If I meant nothing to her, then I would stop living like I did. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. I drove home as the sky lightened. No music, no distractions, just the quiet hum of tires on pavement and the final remnants of whatever love I had left draining out of me. It wasn't that I didn't love her anymore. I did. God help me. I still do. But love without boundaries is just servitude. And I had finally reached my limit. Morning came without ceremony. No chirping birds. No warm sunlight streaming through my window. Just a gray wash of dull light that made the entire house feel colder than it actually was. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed for a few hours, but my body never settled. My mind was a freight train of images, mostly of her growing up, missing teeth, tiny backpacks, scraped knees, and tearful hugs, all colliding with the sound of her voice from the night before, praising the man who had simply showed up late and reaped the rewards I bled for. I kept hearing that one line. He's the best thing to ever happen to me. I wondered if she ever said that about me. I wondered if it ever crossed her mind, the weight I carried so she didn't have to. And when I realized it probably hadn't, something in me clicked shut, like a heavy vault door sealing itself for good. I was in my home office by 6. The first call I made was to the family lawyer. I didn't stutter. I didn't hesitate. Remove her from the will. Effective immediately, I said. We'll go over the rest of the changes when you come in later this week. He paused. He's known us for years, helped me draft the original documents when she was still in braces. Are you sure? He asked, his voice cautious. She's your only child. I stared out the window and said, I've given her everything. If that wasn't enough, then neither is my legacy. I hung up before he could respond. I knew what he was thinking, but I also knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. And I was done bleeding for someone who couldn't even offer me a moment of gratitude on a night that was supposed to be about her. And, in some small way, about us. Next came the business side. I opened the HR system and accessed her profile. She'd been working with me since she graduated, VP of Client Relations, a title I created for her. Not because she wasn't capable, but because I wanted her to have a place in the empire I built. I had trained her, shielded her, even protected her from boardroom politics she didn't know existed. And she was good, efficient, articulate, well-liked. But she was also careless. Entitled. She thought being my daughter made her untouchable. So I revoked her access right then. Company email, locked. Corporate credit cards, canceled. Car leased under the business, disabled with one call to the fleet manager. I sat there, tapping my pen against the desk, then sent a single-line email. Effective today, your employment has been terminated. Details to follow. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe. Sadness. But all I felt was a strange relief. Like I had been holding up a collapsing ceiling for years and finally let it fall. That was the truth of it. I had allowed her to believe love meant never being held accountable. And somewhere along the line, I started believing it too. I kept giving, hoping it would earn me something more permanent than gratitude. But that's the catch with parenthood. It's not a transaction. You don't get a guaranteed return. And some children, no matter how much you love them, will still choose someone else if they think your love is conditional, even when all you're asking for is respect. After the company matters were handled, I turned my attention to the house. I had given her that house 2 years ago. Signed it over with the kind of pride only a father could feel, watching his little girl step into a life of her own. It was a 3-bedroom in a safe, gated neighborhood with a backyard big enough for the dog she swore she'd get, but never did. I covered the taxes, the maintenance, the utilities. She called it her space, and I let her believe that, because she was still my daughter, because I thought I was investing in a bond that couldn't be broken. That morning, I called the real estate agent who handled most of my commercial properties. List the house, I told her. Market rate. Vacant by next month. She asked if I was sure. It's under her name, isn't it? I could hear her flipping through the files. Not anymore, I said. Title never officially transferred. She never completed the final paperwork. It's still mine. I want it sold. I didn't warn her. I didn't give her a heads up. She'd find out soon enough, when the locks changed or when the listing went up online. At that point, the shock would be hers to deal with. She'd spent years reaping the fruits of my labor without once pausing to ask how the tree was doing. So no, I didn't feel the need to soften the blow. I'd spent too many years cushioning everything for her, making sure she never felt the sharp edges of the world. But if she could stand in a room full of people and act like I hadn't mattered, then she could damn well stand in line at a leasing office and figure out her next move. By 10 a.m., my phone started ringing. Texts poured in first, friends who had been at the dinner, co-workers who heard whispers about the sudden firing. A few emails from board members, politely asking for clarification. But I ignored them all until her number popped up on the screen. I watched it ring, let it buzz until it went to voicemail. She called again, then again. The 4th time, I picked up, not out of weakness, but because I wanted her to hear the finality in my voice. What the hell is going on? She snapped. No greeting, no apology, just entitlement, pure and sharp. I can't get into my company account. My cards are declined. Someone said I've been fired. I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. Correct, I said. You've been fired. Access revoked. House is being listed. Car will be towed tomorrow. There was a pause, longer than I expected. Then a laugh, brittle and angry. Are you serious right now? You're doing all this because I brought my stepdad to dinner? I almost laughed myself. No, I said. I'm doing this because last night, I realized I don't matter to you. And I've decided to stop pretending that I do. She started yelling then, accusing me of being dramatic, of sabotaging her life, of being jealous, just like she said before. Go to him, I told her. You made it clear who matters. Let him help you now. Then I hung up. And this time, she didn't call back. Fallout doesn't come all at once. It doesn't hit like a car crash with shattered glass and loud sirens. No, it creeps in like a gas leak, silent, slow, and invisible until something sparks and everything explodes. The day after I cut her off, I could already feel the air shifting around me. I walked into the office like I always did, dressed in the same tailored suit, holding the same cup of black coffee from the same corner shop. But there was a silence that followed me, thick and unnatural. People avoided eye contact. Whispers halted when I passed. I could feel their eyes trailing behind me, as if they were trying to decide whether I was cruel or courageous. That's the thing with public decisions. Everyone has an opinion, even when they weren't there to see how the story unfolded. By noon, 2 department heads had come into my office under the guise of weekly updates. They danced around the topic like amateur actors auditioning for a play they didn't believe in. Just wondering what the plan is for client transition now that, well, with your daughter no longer in the picture. I answered plainly. Her accounts will be reassigned. I've already brought in a temporary replacement. Permanent roles will be filled next quarter. They nodded, eyes shifting nervously like they wanted to say more, but couldn't find the courage. And then came the question I had been expecting. Are you okay? I looked up from my laptop and met his eyes. I'm not here to be okay. I'm here to run a company. That shut him up. He left with a mumbled, let us know if you need anything. And the door clicked behind him like a final punctuation mark. But it didn't end there. The real fallout began when the story leaked, not through press releases or formal statements, but through the ever-reliable, always ruthless grapevine of social media. Someone, maybe a friend of hers or a colleague still loyal to her, posted a thread. It didn't mention names outright, but anyone who knew us would connect the dots. It painted me as a controlling father, a man who couldn't stand his daughter having another father figure. Imagine being punished for loving someone else, one tweet read. Another said, he fired his daughter over a dinner speech. What kind of man does that? The likes piled up. The comments were merciless. I sat at my desk, watching it unfold like a train wreck in slow motion, and I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I had already chosen my silence as a shield. My assistant, Rachel, knocked quietly on my door that afternoon. She's been with me for 10 years, seen me through the highs and lows, through my wife leaving, through my daughter's college years. She entered with her usual clipboard, but I could tell something was different by the way she hesitated at the chair. You sure you don't want to say anything publicly? She asked, gently. Even just a statement to clarify? I shook my head. If people want to believe I'm the villain, let them. I'm not in the business of begging for sympathy. She looked at me for a long moment before nodding and saying, you're allowed to be hurt, you know, even when you're right. And then she left me alone with that uncomfortable truth. It wasn't just the company. My personal phone buzzed nonstop. My sister texted me, furious. You're seriously cutting off your own child over one comment? You've lost it. I didn't reply. She hadn't been there. She hadn't seen the years of slow erosion, the 1,000 paper cuts that had finally bled me dry. Then came a call from my ex-wife. Voicemail, of course. I didn't answer. Her voice came through the speaker, layered with sarcasm and barely hidden satisfaction. I guess you're happy now. Humiliated her in front of everyone. Took back everything like a spoiled child. She chose love, and you chose pride. Hope you sleep well. I deleted the message without finishing it. She had no right to talk about choices. She had abandoned the hard ones years ago and only reappeared when the heavy lifting had already been done. And then, a few days later, came the most unexpected part of the fallout, a knock at my door on a Friday evening. I opened it to find Jeremy, one of my younger employees, someone I barely knew outside of brief nods in the hallway. He stood there awkwardly, holding a six-pack of beer like it was a peace offering. I know this is weird, he said quickly, but I read what people are saying online. And I just wanted to say, I get it. My dad did the same thing. Chose silence when my mom remarried. Everyone called him bitter. But looking back, I realized he was just tired. Just done. He looked at me with something close to reverence. Anyway, you don't have to drink these with me. Just figured you could use a reminder that not everyone thinks you're the bad guy. I let him in. We didn't talk much. Just sat on the back patio, sipping beer and staring into the quiet of the night. It was the first time in days I didn't feel like I was about to implode. And it reminded me that stories, especially family stories, always have more sides than the ones that get the loudest applause. People want simple villains. But families are never simple. They're messy, layered, and full of truths no one wants to say out loud. Like the fact that sometimes love has to end before resentment begins. Or that a father can do everything right and still be cast as the enemy when he finally says enough. That weekend, I stayed off my phone, took a walk through the park, saw a man teaching his son to ride a bike, and felt an ache that nearly knocked the wind out of me. I had done that too, held the seat while she wobbled down the sidewalk, cheering her on until she took off. I had taught her how to drive, how to file taxes, how to negotiate her first job offer. I had given her everything I had. And still, it hadn't been enough to earn a single mention in her list of people who mattered. So no, I didn't regret pulling away. I regretted waiting this long. The thing about silence is that it doesn't stay quiet forever. At first, it feels like peace, like the world has finally stopped spinning just long enough for you to catch your breath. But after a few days, maybe a week, the silence starts to echo. And in that echo, you hear every version of yourself you've ever been. The father, the protector, the doormat, the fool, the man who held the world together for someone who didn't bother to thank him when he handed it over. The man who finally let go. I thought I'd feel stronger with distance. I thought cutting the cord would bring me a kind of clarity that only comes after decisive action. And in some ways, it did. But that echo, it creeped in slowly, late at night, in the quiet moments between tasks, and made me second-guess everything I had already survived. The hardest part wasn't the public fallout. It wasn't the whispers at work or the gossipy texts from family. It wasn't even the news that my daughter had moved in temporarily with her mother and stepdad, which someone made sure I heard through a mutual friend, like they wanted it to sting. No, the hardest part was the private mourning. The part no one saw. The part where I sat alone in my kitchen, mug of coffee gone cold in my hands, replaying old voicemail messages she'd left me back when she still needed my approval. Daddy, I got the part in the play. Or call me when you can, I need help with this resume thing. Her voice had always had this sing-song cadence when she was excited. It used to light me up inside. Now, it just echoed around the room like a ghost refusing to leave. I began to wonder, had I been too harsh? Was there a version of that dinner where I could have just swallowed the disrespect and carried on? Where I smiled through the speech, toasted her happiness, and preserved the relationship by burying my pride just one more time? Maybe. But every time I flirted with that regret, I returned to one truth. I had asked for one thing. Just one. A boundary that wasn't controlling or cruel. A single evening where I could exist without being eclipsed. And she didn't just ignore it. She mocked it. She named him guest of honor. She called him the best thing to ever happen to her while I sat there, invisible, holding the memories of scraped knees and sleepless nights like a fool clutching a losing lottery ticket. So no, I hadn't been harsh. I had been honest. Brutally, finally honest. And it was about damn time. Still, the guilt lingered. Not because I believed I was wrong, but because no matter how justified you are, cutting off your child carves something out of you. It rewires your instincts. For 25 years, I had been on high alert for her. Every unfamiliar number that called my phone, I assumed it might be her in trouble. Every time the news mentioned an accident or a protest, I scanned the details, looking for connections. That didn't change just because I removed her from my will. It didn't vanish because her name was no longer on the payroll. The father in me still lived, pacing in a locked room inside my chest, wondering if I'd ever be able to fully shut him up. Then came the email. Not from her, but from her stepfather. A single-line subject. Can we talk? For a second, I considered deleting it without opening it. I owed him nothing. But curiosity, or maybe something closer to rage, got the better of me. I clicked. The message was brief, almost sterile. I know things are tense. I'm not trying to make it worse. I'd like to meet. Man to man. No pressure. I sat back, rereading it several times. No pressure. What a laughable phrase. The man had inserted himself into my daughter's life like a virus, quiet, persistent, eventually taking over. And now he wanted to talk? Still, part of me needed to hear what he had to say. Maybe because I wanted to confirm what I already believed. Or maybe because I wanted to look him in the eye and see if he even understood what he had helped destroy. We met at a cafe 2 days later. I chose the time and place. Neutral ground. I arrived early, took the seat facing the door, and waited. When he walked in, he looked exactly as I remembered, well-groomed, confident, the kind of man who never fumbled a handshake or said the wrong thing at dinner. He sat down, ordered a tea, and opened with, "Thank you for meeting me." I didn't respond, just stared, let the silence do the heavy lifting. He shifted in his seat before finally saying, "She's hurting, you know." I almost laughed. She was hurting while she was naming you the best thing that ever happened to her. He looked down at his cup. "That speech wasn't meant to hurt you," he said. "It was emotional. Off the cuff." She didn't think. I cut him off. "No, she didn't. And now she gets to sit in it." He nodded slowly. "I'm not here to defend her. Or myself. I just wanted you to know. She's not as ungrateful as she sounded. I narrowed my eyes. Then maybe she should have said something. At any point. Even one sentence. He held up a hand. I agree. She screwed up. Badly. But cutting her off like that, everything, all at once, it gutted her. I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. I spent 25 years protecting her from the world. You think she's gutted? She's finally feeling what it's like to stand alone. Welcome to adulthood. We sat in silence for a moment before he said, she'll never ask for forgiveness. She's too proud, too hurt. But I thought you should know, she does love you. She's just, I shook my head. Lost? Confused? No, she's just made her choice. And now she gets to live with it. He didn't argue. He just nodded, left cash for his tea, and stood. I hope it doesn't stay like this, he said. For her sake. For yours too. I didn't respond. I watched him walk away, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel anger toward him. Just indifference. And that, in its own way, was progress. There's something strange about peace when it finally arrives. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself with a sunrise or a moment of cinematic clarity. It just appears. One morning, I stood in my kitchen, pouring coffee into my favorite chipped mug, the one my daughter painted for me when she was 11 with "Best Dad Ever" written in crooked, bubbly letters, and I didn't feel hollow anymore. I didn't flinch at the sound of my phone buzzing. I didn't check my email obsessively, waiting for another backlash or plea. The house was quiet, but for once, it didn't feel empty. It felt mine. And that peace, it wasn't loud, but it was final, like a closing door that no longer needed to be slammed to make its point. In the weeks that followed that cafe meeting with her stepdad, I kept waiting for some kind of grand gesture. An apology, a text, a voicemail, anything that would suggest she saw the fracture and wanted to repair it. But none came. And after a while, I stopped waiting. Not out of spite, but because I realized I wasn't the one who owed anything. For 25 years, I had been the safety net, the soft place to land, the one who answered every call, solved every crisis, forgave every offense before it had time to fully bruise. I had given her that power, thinking it was love, thinking that's what good fathers did. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's desperation disguised as devotion. And I had finally untangled myself from it. Some of my friends still tiptoed around the topic. A few even pulled me aside gently, especially the ones with kids of their own, and tried to suggest reconciliation. You don't want to look back and regret this, one said. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, I already spent a decade regretting how much of myself I gave without ever asking what I got in return. He nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. I didn't need validation from anyone anymore. That's what happens when you finally draw a line in the sand and decide not to move it, even when the waves come crashing. You stop asking people to clap for your decisions. You just make them, and you live with the peace they bring or the silence they cost. I sold the house she had lived in. It went quickly, prime neighborhood, clean title, recently renovated. I drove by it one last time before the new owners moved in. I didn't get out, just sat across the street, staring at the front door I used to carry groceries through, the porch I helped her decorate with lights each Christmas. There were still faded chalk drawings on the side path, a leftover remnant from one of her friend's kids. I took a breath, deep and steady, and whispered, "Thank you," to the car's interior. Not to her, not to myself, just to the space, to the time, to the version of me that had existed inside that home. Hopeful, trying, always giving. Then I drove away. I haven't been back since. At work, things leveled out. The board stopped asking questions. The whispers died down. Rachel, my assistant, eventually told me that several staff members quietly expressed support. They didn't know the whole story, she said. But once they saw you still showing up, still leading, still treating people with fairness, they stopped doubting your side. I nodded, grateful but unmoved. I wasn't trying to win hearts. I was just trying to live honestly again. And for the first time in years, I did. I didn't carry the weight of unspoken resentment into meetings. I didn't edit my own thoughts before saying them aloud. I didn't bend myself into a more likable shape just to keep a peace that had never been mutual. I stood straighter. I breathed deeper. I finally stopped apologizing for asking to be treated like I mattered. She did reach out once, about 6 weeks after everything fell apart. It was a text. Short. Blunt. Can we talk? No apology. No context. Just 3 words. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me, a deep, aching part, wanted to respond instantly. To meet her where she was, no matter how far I had traveled to get here. But the wiser part of me knew better. Knew that no real conversation had ever begun with silence, disrespect, and then a demand. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because I loved myself enough not to go running back to the same door she had slammed in my face. She made her toast. She chose her words. Now she could live with their taste in her own mouth for a while longer. I haven't blocked her number. I haven't cut her off emotionally forever. But I've stopped making myself available for people who treat my presence like background noise. I've stopped being a cushion for her unexamined emotions. If she wants to speak to me again, she'll have to come correct, clear, honest, and without entitlement. I won't beg for that. I won't wait for it. I won't even expect it. And maybe that's the most honest I've ever been about our relationship. I was the doormat once, but not anymore. I keep that mug on a shelf now. The one she painted when she still saw me as the center of her world. I don't use it, not because I'm angry, but because some things are meant to remind us without reopening the wound. That mug is a relic of a simpler time, before adult egos and shifting loyalties turned love into something negotiable. I glance at it sometimes while I work or cook dinner alone, and I don't feel bitterness. I feel closure. I did everything I could. And when that wasn't enough, I did the hardest thing a parent can do. I let go. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose self-respect over unconditional love, share your thoughts below. Would you have walked away or waited for an apology? Real stories deserve real conversations. Let's talk about boundaries, loyalty, and what it truly means to stop being a doormat. And if you want more raw, honest family drama like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. See you soon in the next story.